Hello, everyone. It's time for another episode of DevtoDev, the podcast about everyday video game developers and why they do what they do every day. I'm here excited to have another conversation with a former friend and colleague. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Bau, actually. Currently working as a lead combat designer over at Skybound Games under the Quarter-Up Studio. And I guess I've been doing this for, 26 years now. Been doing it off and on for quite some time. And everything's
good. Yeah. Plenty of history to dive into and plenty to kind of get help get to know you.
A lot to make fun of, you know.
I mean, ditto, right? We've got a few of those. I always like to start this conversation with one of my favorite questions. What first inspired you about video games?
Oh my gosh. That's personal, man. Well, given our age, I'm pretty sure you have a semi-similar upbringing where I got into it pretty darned early. First game was Pong. Got into the 2600 or the Atari like pretty early as well. One of the very first games that I was obsessed with was Centipede. It's one of the only games that I rolled and such. And it was just one of those things where like I played it. I was like, this is cool. Like it's very, very specific. It's very straightforward, like what you're trying to achieve and stuff. But then I had some of those gamer instincts where I figured out how to game the system, you know, and I'd set up the tunnel where basically like I would kill the centipedes in a very specific pattern. So they'd always have to go down this one center point. And it was just easy to just mow them down. And it was just one of those things that like, once I figured that out, like once that clicked and I was like, okay. And I just did it until like I flipped the score. And once I saw that aspect of, you know, for games, I'm like, I can try to do some clever stuff just to, you know, do the game make the game do what I want it to do, you know, kind of stuff. And like, it was just kind of cool to me. And like, as you know, games are a very different media. Like it's, you know, not music where you're just listening to it, or it's not movies where you're listening and watching, you know, it's not a comic book where you're reading and the imagination takes place. It's like, it's all of the above as well as, you know, hands-on, like you're actually affecting what's going on the screen. And there's something wildly compelling about it. It's like, you know, it's the analogy I used to use is like, you know, choose your own adventure, but you're actively, you know, controlling the narrative as you go and stuff too. And it's all about experiences and storytelling and what the game designers are trying to have you feel like and everything too. So it's like, I've always been interested as to all the different stories that people have to tell and everything. So it's always been a very compelling aspect of games and, you know, what you could do across the board. So
interesting. Okay. So an element of kind of breaking the rules then, kind of here's the rule set, like the Centipede example, right? Here's the rule set and, you found a way to kind of game that system and break the rules for, to make it function the way you wanted to function. And then an element of kind of that immersive experience, the player story that's kind of grabbed you. Was there a particular game that grabbed you on that side early on? Because obviously Centipede stories, what story? But were there kind of early games that really connected with you there?
Well, it's funny too, because a lot of the games in the past, like there was no real narrative. You're just in a scenario doing something. But even like a game like Pitfall, like you're just this dude, jumping over crocodiles and like swinging across vines and stuff like that. And then you actually get to, the prize at the end and stuff. Like in my mind, I was like, at one point I just stopped. I'm like, why am I doing this? And stuff. And then I'm like, and then the whole Indiana Jones correlation and stuff like that too. And it was like, oh, okay, cool. And then like, that's what kind of not necessarily lit the fire, but it was like, it like hinted at stuff. And there was a game on, oh my gosh, I think it was the Commodore. It was basically one of the old fantasy kind of RPG style games. It's like, the most basic of pixel graphics, where you're like this character like 16 pixels tall, and you have like this 3 pixel long sword, and you're like da, 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 but you're like fighting things, and like you're exploring dungeons, and like the way they portray that, where you had a very limited cone of vision around you and stuff like that. Like there was something super interesting about that, where I'm like, okay, like I feel like in a bigger, grander story here, and then like I said, even with those super limited graphics, you still felt something. Like there's more than just like what's being shown on this little kind of screen and stuff too. So that's when things started to really, really pick up. And then of course, then we get to more modern gaming, where it's just like, oh, there's actual storylines, and like people actually delivering like compelling dialogue and stuff like that too. And that's been evolving like over the years as well. So it's like I said, at the end of the day, like we're storytellers, and stuff too. And along with that story is an experience and stuff too. So it's very different. Like we're trying to be as immersive as possible a lot of times. So
yeah. Got it. So even a basic context of a game like Pitfall was evocative to you and kind of got you excited, and that's cool. I love that. And where did you grow up? Where was this happening?
I was living in Southern California. I was in San Diego and such. And it's funny because around that time, arcades really weren't that prevalent around here and stuff. At the time, I actually had to take a bus to go like 2 or 3 cities over just to go to an arcade, or if I happen to know of like a like a convenience store, or like a gas station, or sometimes like a pizza shop or something like that, they might have like 1 or 2 cabs, and they would rotate them out. And so I had this thing where every like 2 or 3 weeks, I'd go to a couple different spots that were in our city, and then I would like, okay, cool. What do they have? Oh, it's the same stuff. Okay. And just peace out and stuff, but then if there was anything new, then like I would just be coming back there, like every week and stuff, and trying to get in some matches and stuff too. But it was kind of tough. Like in the early games of like arcades and stuff, especially down here, like there wasn't really much available, and it took a while, before it actually really started taking off and stuff too. But yeah, I miss the arcade days. Like there's something interesting, and like it's I mean, for one, it's the social aspect is because you're there oftentimes with other people and stuff too, and like you're all playing the games and like kind of having like a shared experience with something, especially if there's something that's like super compelling, like, oh, it's a co-op style game, or something that's like a head-to-head game, like a fighting game or something. There's something different about that, as opposed to like, now it's almost all home gaming, so it's like there's always that detached feeling. It's like I'm having this experience, and there's other people, maybe possibly like in the ether that they're also having this experience, but it's separate at the same time.
So those early arcade days kind of really grabbed you then. The rotation of the game, the format, the social nature of it, was kind of addictive as well. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. And did you have any siblings, any other people in your family that were gamers at the time?
I was definitely the black sheep. I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, nothing, none of that sorts. Like I played D&D, like I actually started watching anime around that time, like in its early days and stuff. And I love video games and fantasy novels and like horror, like all that stuff, like all that old school, geeky type stuff. So it's my brother and sister were into more standard, high schoolish kind of stuff and everything. So like my brother was into like track and football and like skating, and my sister was, movies, Friends, all that stuff. Like, they weren't really, they didn't really subscribe to that type of frivolity, as it were.
Got it. So you were kind of the primary gamer, and I guess when you went to school, did you kind of find some fellow folks there that were into video games?
No, actually, because it was like, it's funny because at the time, like games really weren't like, they were kind of shunned. Like you were, if you played games, like you were like, oh, you're like the geek, the nerd, the what have you, stuff like that. And especially because like that, there was a lot of demonizing of that type of stuff. So like I said, D&D at the time was like, oh, it's the devil's work, and like hard rock and metal and all that stuff. Like it was kind of lumped together, by a lot of different people. So, they had like some like the metalheads, like some of them might play some video games sometimes, stuff like that, but they were their own crowds, and usually like the gamers were like the outcasts, in some way and stuff too. And, but at the time it's like, it was like, whatever, like this is just some fun stuff. So like, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. So
yeah,
good luck.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, so at school, kind of, one of the few gamers. And did you go to college? Like, did you have a change there, or?
No. What actually wound up happening when I started meeting, friends that became gamers was soon after, got out of high school, where some of my high school friends at the time, like they were my group that I used to play like Dungeons and Dragons with and stuff. And we like, we were just general like buddies. In general, like some of them actually wound up getting, PCs, around that time. And one of them in particular, actually had, his own like main computer, but he was kind of like one of those enthusiasts. So he actually had like his main, he had like a backup, then like a backup put together with all like the whatever leftover parts that he had and stuff. And we would do LAN parties, so it's like a bunch of them were they were going to college at the time. I was working, and then on the weekends, like every so often, like we'd all get together, order some pizzas, and like that's when we started PC gaming. And the funny thing about that was, in the early days, like I said, he put those PCs together with whatever he had left over. So my early days of PC gaming was with a trackball and a mouse and keyboard. So playing Counter-Strike with the thumb was a very interesting experience. Same thing with like playing StarCraft, or StarCraft 2 and stuff like that. Or Brood War in particular was our jam. Unreal Tournament and stuff like that. But trying to play those types of games on a trackball was a challenge. But it was one of those things where I'd never been exposed to PC gaming before then, because like, we could never afford a computer. So it was like a whole new world. I was like, this is some cool stuff. And it was one of those things where it just like it renewed that interest, because I'd actually been playing like console games for a while, growing up and stuff, even to the point where one of my cousins, who was quite a bit older, he actually would buy like the Commodores and like all the latest computers or like software and stuff, and he would bring them over so he could like hang out with the family. And he'd always get mad at me because I would actually beat whatever game he'd actually have on his computer while they were talking. I'm just like, do. I'm like, oh, okay. And like, I just go through things and just burn through all of his games. And like it was funny. But like I said, like that kept the interest in everything. And then, like I said, as soon as, I was playing on my friend's PC, like that's when it really kicked into like high gear, when I saw like, all the like first person shooters and like, MMOs and all that stuff. Like it was so different that I'm like this is some really cool stuff. And that's actually what kind of led me to getting into the industry. Was during one of our LAN parties, one of my buddies was going to SDSU, and they had a job posting for quality assurance over at Midway in San Diego at the time. And I was like, what's quality assurance? He's like, oh no, it's testing for the games and so on and so forth. And I was like, wait, what? Like you get to play whoa, like what the heck? I'm totally down. And so he went back to the job board, and he grabbed all information and gave it to me, and like sent in my my resume, and made some phone calls and so on and so forth. And to this day, like I don't remember if I told you this, my claim to fame was actually being the only one person that got this specific question during the phone interview right. And because they would do the standard, like, oh, what's your experience like? What do you do this? What's your hours like? Et cetera, et cetera. What's your background? And he stopped and he said, oh, okay, I have to ask this to all the applicants. He's like, what's the average airspeed of a swallow? And I'm like, oh, is that a African or European swallow? He's like, yep. Wait, what did you just say? I'm like, yeah, is that a African or European swallow? And he's like, you're the only person that's ever got that right. Can you come in tomorrow? like it was the super most random, like geekiest, like claim to fame ever, but it literally got me the job. And like, that's what set me on the path, to
Wait, that's a Monty Python reference, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So a Monty Python reference got you a job at Midway. I love that.
Yeah. It's hilarious too, because he's like, we're supposed to ask that question to catch people off guard and see what they're like, exactly, and stuff. But he's like, you didn't even miss a beat. You just give me the actual answer. And I'm like, yeah, I know that one. He's like, it was super cool.
I love that. So had you at any point before that thought about getting into the industry, or did it take sort of your friends saying, oh, there's a QA role? Was that what triggered it?
Well, back then, like, getting the industry was so opaque. Like, you had no idea. Like, do I just like randomly start calling companies? Like, how does this even work? Like, it's like trying to get into movies, or any other like really well established industry. It's like, how do you get your foot in the door? Like, who do you actually reach out to? Like, now like there's so many resources available to anybody that wants to, show some interest and see, about getting in anywhere. Like, there's opportunities and there's ways to do so. And there's even like ways to prep for that. There's like Guildhall and like other colleges or training courses and stuff. Or honestly too, like, given how many engines are available now that have so many available resources online, like, you could do so much just to prep for that, that possibility and stuff too. But like back then, like, you had no idea. Like, there were so many games that were made by people like in their garage, and so on and so forth, that they built that up to a company. And then, once they're there, you're like, wait, how do I even talk to these people? Like, what the heck? So that's, like I said, that's because my buddy randomly saw that job posting and he's just like, hey, John might like this and Bill might like this. Okay, cool. And stuff. So yeah, it's
meant to be.
Yeah, it is.
So you were at QA at Midway for about a year or so, yeah?
Yeah.
Was that testing home games or arcade games or both? Or
it's a bit of both. Because when I first showed up, it was primarily the tail end of arcade games, but then it dipped straight into like console stuff. And back then was oh my gosh, what was my first? I'm trying to remember. Because the one that actually like put in the most time on was Ready to Rumble, Part 2.
Yep.
Like that was the one that where I actually got my in as a designer. Because what happened was, we were doing in-house testing for a while on some local projects. Like it was a football game and there was a basketball game. It was a lot of the old school, Midway games library. And then we got to Ready to Rumble, and they needed some folks to work off-site. And typically when they do off-site testing, it was towards the end of a product, or the end of a dev cycle where like, okay, we're getting ready for submission, and so on and so forth. So they would send, some groups of QA to people that to developers at the time that didn't have any QA available to them, to be able to, do regressions like on site and be able to get them the feedback as quickly as possible. And so they would send groups of like 2 to 3 people depending on how big the project was. And usually they would do it for about a month, and then they would switch people out, and they're like, okay, depending on how long the cycle was and stuff too. I actually wound up, once I got there, I wound up staying there for like 3 months, like offsite, working with the developers and stuff. And that actually, as it so happens, like, led me to getting to know and, like really be able to communicate more and more with the team itself and like the CO and like all the producers and everybody involved and stuff too. And that's, it was just, again, like going back to that meant to be kind of thing where it's like, they kept requesting for me to stay there. Cause like, oh no, we want, John, cause he knows, he knows the process. He knows it's going down, like he knows who to talk to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, to the point when finally, when we finished and like I actually went back to San Diego to work on site again, about 4+ months later, they actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, what you doing? Like, you want to be a game designer?" And I was like, "What? Yes, please." Like, it was one of those things because I didn't even know that was the thing. Like, I had no idea. Like, especially at that time where you're like, again, because we talk about, it's the gates. It's like, how do you get in contact with people? Like, how do you become, go into QA? How do you go into, design? How do you go into like engineering or like producer or anything? So it was so opaque. Like, there was no info about anything and stuff too. So at the time, like, I had no idea. And they just like, "Hey, how's it going?" And I was just like, it's good. How you guys been? And everything. And they offered me a spot. And at the time, that was absolutely terrifying to me because it was one of those things because it's like, okay, I would actually be, moving from San Diego up to Orange County, on a pretty small salary, and everything too. And, by myself and all this other stuff too. Like, I was not in any way, shape or form prepared for any of the above. And it was one of those things too, where it's like, my family wasn't really, in favor of my job choices anyways. Like, they were always like, "You could do something better. Like, you can, I'm sure you could, find something that's more suited, blah, 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 blah." And it was just one of those things where, as soon as I mentioned it, like, they kind of freaked out. There's like, "So you're going to move off like to a completely different city by yourself, doing this job you've never done before, and I'm just like, but it's what I want to do. Like, this is literally like a dream job for me because I didn't even know it was possible, like, as an option and stuff too. And then it just opened up and I'm ultimately, like I said, despite the friction, I'm like, I'm going to commit. Like, I'm going to do this because this is what I want to do. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out and I'll come back and stuff too. But I gotta take that shot. I gotta take this chance and stuff. And, yeah, it was pretty crazy. But yeah, like that's what started, like,
Yeah. And so that was Point of View. Is that where
Yep.
you joined? Yeah. So you were there for like 4 years. So I'm just want to go back quickly that it sounds like you knew games, right? You played a lot. You were good at them, right? You were finishing them quickly. You were kind of polishing them off, knocking through them. I'm guessing that when you kind of got that opportunity, because first party QA, so you're working on site for a developer is very different to working external, right? You're right. You're right in with the team, right? You can go speak to the actual folks, and even better when you're in an offsite and you're actually working for, directly with the team to help them. I'm guessing that your instinct for game play, right, to get through the games you play, through, finding ways to bend the rules, like you said about Centipede, must have given you kind of clearly gave you kind of a leg up in terms of helping test and helping to improve a game and, in this case, Ready to Rumble.
Well, so the funny thing about this was, at Midway, the testing house was enormous. There was actually like 120 people at the time, and they would actually, ebb and flow. Like, they'd actually, depending on what was going on with how many projects are, in the works and stuff like that, or, we called them like Black Fridays, where it's like, they would get to a certain point and it's like, oh, look, they just finished off this product or this product or this product. Here comes the layoffs and stuff too. And like, you could always tell because there was this vibe, like there's this dark cloud over everything. And there was always this one guy that walks around behind everybody's desk and everybody just kind of like, I'm doing my work. And you'd feel the tap on the shoulder and you're like, okay, we got to go talk. Okay, cool. And stuff. And it's just like, you'd go off to lunch and stuff. You'd come back and then like, a third of the folks are gone,
Wow.
But there was so many people in testing where it was just a pretty established process. It didn't really allow for too many opportunities for people to really showcase, really, really, truly analytical skills. Because I was pretty good at breaking things down, like as a whole, where it's like, oh, that was funky. And then I would actually go through the repro steps and be able to document and stuff like that, which is, to this day, QA is still one of the most like fundamental components towards like helping me become like the designer that I am today. It's like, there's so many, similarities and crucial skills that you learn in QA if you're doing it right anyways. That like, I'm super appreciative of my time while I was at QA and stuff. But yeah, it was like I said, like QA at Midway was very much just kind of like a grind box. You're just like
a bit more of a factory.
Yeah, exactly. When I was working offsite, when I was at POV, that was more of an opportunity to go, oh, okay, cool. Like, and I would find some stuff, and then I'd reach out to whoever, was part of that thing and say, hey, I found this one thing. Was this intended? And stuff, and then cruise by and go, how did you do that? And I'm like, well, and I'd go through the process and step by step and stuff. And that helped a lot and stuff too. So, especially because, like I said, at the time we were working on Red Dead Rumble 2, and there was a lot of mechanical skills that were needed to repro some of the bugs there. So I'm like, oh yeah, so if you use this character with this skin and you get this type of interaction, this bug. And people are like, wait, how did you even do that? I'm like, oh, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and stuff. But it was just one of those things where it's like, yeah, like, cool. Like I had that skill set and, that eye for detail that helped me find all this cool stuff. And, it definitely helped out.
Right. That's good. Yeah. So that makes sense. So yeah, like you say, being a bit more close to the developer helped you kind of stretch those analytical skills. And while you were there, you kind of worked on a few different combat games. Yeah. Scorpion King, Spawn.
Yep.
And after Ready to Rumble, which was a boxing game.
Yep.
So was that, how did you sort of find your way into that? I mean, it wasn't the only things you did, but, how did you kind of find your way into an aspect of design that really grabbed you? Was it combat that grabbed you right away, or how did that go?
Well, combat's always grabbed me. Because for me, there's something compelling about, like melee, like actual melee combat. It's the give and take, the mind games, the spacing, there's something different about it. Like, there's a very intimate component to it where it's like I'm dealing with space. I'm dealing with somebody in front of me as an opponent, versus like an FPS. Like I love FPS, don't get me wrong. Like, but it's something different. There's like there's a detached element from like I'm, however many meters away, and like I'm looking at somebody down this hallway, and I'm like, pew, okay, like he fell down. Yeah, I win. Stuff too. There's a very detached component to it. Whereas like in melee, there's something about it that like that's always really sung for me, and I'm like, I really, really dug this. And it also goes back to the fact that Devil May Cry is probably one of my favorite games of all time. And when I actually got into combat design, like one of my first gigs was designing the combat system for what is it? Scorpion King. Like. Absolutely no idea what the fuck I was doing. Like I was just like, they're like, oh yeah, we need to do some combat. I'm like, okay, and they're like, it was just one of those things where, I can replicate stuff pretty straightforward. As I'm like, okay, here's the system, and like, it's going to use these weapons, and like, these are defensive capabilities. And, like there's even like a super meter and all this stuff. Like I was drawing from as many different sources as I was familiar with. And I'm like, this could be cool. This could be cool. This could be cool. And this is before even actually seeing the movie, because the movie was in development while we were working on it and stuff. And one of the most random aspects of the first game that I worked on is when we were first talking about it, they were trying to make it, quote unquote, realistic. So they were like, okay, this needs to be more grounded, more like, the realism needs to be an aspect of it. And like, and then we actually saw the movie. And the funny thing about it was I'd been pushing. I'm like, well, I want to give some of these reactions like really big, really big umps. So if like you do this uppercut, like the dude gets launched, if I do this push kick, like the dude gets, you could sling him into stuff. And like, they saw that they're like, and they really pushed back against it. They're like, no, I don't know. It goes a little bit too far. I'm like, yeah, but it's fun. Like, this is cool stuff and everything. And, And then we saw the movie, and they were like, oh, "Yeah, go ahead. Put that back in," you know. But by then, it was also like it was a 9-month project. Like, so
Wow.
that was my introduction to the death marches, you know.
Yeah.
Where and like I was really surprised when we actually took time off to go to see the movie, because we were working 7 days a week, like no days off for months, like literally. People were sleeping in the office and stuff too. But I was like, oh, I guess this is how it is. Okay, cool, you know, and stuff. Like it was some rough times, but yeah, it was just because it was combat, you know. And there was something there that I'm like, I just want to make it the best as possible, and like, and yeah, it was first attempt. It was hella sloppy and like super janky. Like we were utilizing motion capture for the first time as well too. So I was directing motion capture shoots, you know, my first year as a designer and stuff. So that was there's so many things going on and stuff too. So it was a thing. It was a process.
That's learning on the job. Learning on the job.
Yeah.
Okay. So combat has kind of always been a draw to you then, and I guess from POV you went to the collective.
Yep.
And then continue to do, you know, various different things. Silent Hill Homecoming, that was kind of a big thing, yeah.
Well, so just real quick, like, when I was at POV, it says 4 years, but I actually at one point was laid off, in the middle of that, and that was because kind of similar to that situation that I mentioned with Midway, like they just finished a project, and hey, guess what? Like, we only have the budget for so many people, blah, blah, blah. You know, I was just one of those people that I got the axe. And there was a lot of politics at the time too, as there always are and such too. So there was some decisions that were questionable. But so I was laid off at the time, and then I was brought back on to do NARC. And that's when I started to expand my development skills, like because before, when I was working on my previous projects, it was a very limited form of scripting. It was very like hands off, like working with a bunch of data tables and like, you know, implementing stuff, but it was very loose, very detached. Working on NARC was a very different engine, because we were working with a different company, but it would give me an opportunity to not only learn level design and like scripting systems in a completely different way, but just also scripting as a whole. Like one of the things that because NARC was a third person like brawler shooter kind of game, and one of the things that I really, really liked was I had the capabilities to turn a third person shooter into or a third person brawler shooter into a rail shooter during one of the sequences. I actually took one of the cars, I put it on a specific route, and then I attached the player to the top of the car, and it gave him a gun with unlimited ammo, and I just put him on this rail, you know, this rail shooter with all these guys jumping at him and stuff like that too. And like, it was a cool little fun sequence that people were like, wait, what? Like, how is this a thing? You know, I'm like, it's a thing. You know, I put it together. And it was a side quest kind of thing and stuff too. So it wasn't like it wasn't really distracting or like off-putting or anything. People were just like, oh, that's kind of cool and stuff too. So it was one of those things where it kind of opened things up for me a little bit more with regards to like possibilities, where I'm like, oh, I can actually control all this stuff. Like that's cool. And that's actually learning that is what actually got me the in over at the collective, is because they were looking for scripters, you know, with combat experience at the time. And I got brought on for a game called Mark Echo's Getting Up, which was a third-person brawler with some navigation and like tagging, you know, like, graffiti and stuff like that. So it was, like, it was cool. Like, it was a very different environment, very different feeling, different managers as well and stuff too. But it was a cool experience because a lot of the people that I got to meet and work there are people that, like, I worked with off and on throughout the rest of my career. Like even to the point, like now, one of the guys that I started working with at the time, this guy named Dave Hall, we started on the same day. And he's now the game director on the game that I'm on, and I'm the lead combat designer. So it was just one of those things where it's like, it's like, it was, again, one of those, meant to be kind of things and stuff too. And meeting some really good friends and stuff too. So it was cool. It was a cool experience.
Got it. That is interesting. So you kind of, you unlocked a more technical side to your skill set through POV. Sounds like you broke the rules within what that game should do, which is great, right? Again, sort of, that seems like a theme. And so that moves you into a more technical designer role then, the scripted designer, which you say is kind of a different aspect of the job, right? Is being more hands-on, having more control over what does what and what goes with what and make it function.
Well, that's the interesting thing though too, is because you say technical designer, and depending at the company that you're at, people have very different expectations or like definitions for what a designer is and does. When I was at POV, it was very loose. You're just like, people just do whatever they need to do and get the job done and stuff like that. At the collective, it very much was, if you say a designer, they expected you to be a technical designer. You're the person that just does the implementation. They had a different form of a designer that actually did a lot of like the narrative, like the lore, like the kind of the higher level stuff. And we were more of like the meat and potatoes of the game itself for the implementation and such goes. And I actually fought against that a lot when I was there, because I love the technical side of things because it lets you do what you need to do. But at the same time, it's very specific. You're like, oh, look, I'm going to take this task and achieve this task. It doesn't leave you as much like creative liberty and freedom to do something interesting and unique and stuff too. And I'm like, we could do so much more if we're just given a little bit more leeway and stuff too. And it took a while to the point where Dave and I, as we were working on different projects, they kept trying to like pigeonhole everybody. Like, oh yeah, you're just a technical designer. You're doing this and stuff. We're like, we could do more. Like we just, and to the point where Dave and I we fought for, there are some people that are creative designers, we call them, and then there's also the technical designers. And Dave was definitely more of a technical side with creative aspirations as well. Like he had a very specific like skill set as far as like the way he handled the creative side of things. And I was the flip. Like I was very creative with not as much technical skills, but I was solid. I'm like, oh cool, like I could get all this stuff done, and I'm just not as like I didn't have a CS degree or anything like that. I just take the tools and I figure it out and I work with it and stuff too. So we went back and forth, just tried to get this concept across that it's not just technical. Like there's exactly. There's much more. There's more nuance there and stuff too. And so it's it was something that took a while, and eventually they started to see the prospect there. But it was like I said, some of the higher ups were very they were very determined. I'll just say in their point of view.
Yeah, I mean that I think that's another fascinating angle of design, right? Is the creative versus the technical. I think I'm very similar on both. I've done bits, only creative, only technical, and right in the middle. So yeah, it's an interesting, and not everyone is drawn to that, right? Not everyone's drawn to that more technical side. Some are, some only want to do the technical side. So yeah, that's interesting. Interesting that the differences between those two studios was stark, and fortunate that you got the opportunity at POV to find your way into that, that different angle that the collective had. Yep. Okay, so working through the collective, working on, like you mentioned, Mark Echoes and then Silent Hill, and I guess still kind of with a combat bent. On and DaVinci, you worked on DaVinci Code as well. I remember that game. Yeah, that's a still with a combat bent though. Yeah.
Well, it just so happened that the collective is very much like a combat house. Like they were always about combat as a whole. Like Buffy the Vampire Slayer was like one of their big titles that they were known for, and such. And you mentioned the DaVinci Code because it's hilarious because we worked on Mark Echo's Getting Up, and right when they were wrapping that, I was doing some early prototyping for another project that they were getting together, and it was more of a third person like shooter cop story. Like I can't really say much about it because it never came out, but oh no, I can because it says Dirty Harry, so there it is. So yeah, I was working on a lot of prototype for Dirty Harry, like systems wise and stuff too. And meanwhile, a bunch of the other folks were working on the DaVinci Code and to me, it was one of those things. I'm like, wait, what? Like, we're a combat house, we're a combat studio, and working on DaVinci Code, and so yeah, it's like it was very much a puzzle narrative driven game, with combat, and like there was actually some pretty involved sequences where it's like Dave handled a lot of the stuff on that one, and there was a couple sequences where it was like a multi-person grapple, like that was differently timed. Like it was so like when I saw the script, I'm like, how did you even do this? Like you're a wizard, Dave. Like it was crazy. But yeah, like we did a combat puzzle game.
Yep.
Cool. And everything too. And,
yeah. That's cool. So a mixture of kind of licensed stuff and, kind of other franchise stuff. And then so you're there for a couple of years, and then an official sort of combat / system designer role at Crystal Dynamics and with Eidos.
So how that transitioned was I helped finish off the rest of DaVinci Code, and that's when we jumped into Silent Hill. That was an insane project in and of itself because we had a directive from Konami where they were like, hey, we want to try a different approach towards Silent Hill. We want to, still maintain, the psychological horror component and like the deep lore narrative and like the investigation, discovery, the horror, of course, and stuff too. But we want to try more active combat, a lot more engagement on that side of things. And when we were first starting to do the early stages of that, it was kind of an involved process because we were throwing stuff out there to say, hey, how about this? How about this? How about this? There was a lot of red tape. There was a lot of like back and forth. There was some folks that just weren't on board with the decision to the point where once it got to a certain point, there was some key personnel that were actually shifted to different roles. And that's where Dave and myself like took over for, to leading the charge for the combat side of things. So I actually designed the combat systems for Silent Hill. There was an opportunity for like really, like I'd actually learned a lot more throughout the course of the last several years. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like we got this. And like, this is also, working hand in hand with Dave and like the rest of the designers were like, hey, can we do this and stuff? And we got to the point where we set up like a really solid core system and then got it propagated out, and again, we, started working on the designs for the NPCs and then I did some of the bosses and so on and so forth. But at the time, Dirty Harry actually wound up getting sunset, like, and that's when a lot of the crazy shakeups were happening. And like, keep in mind, this is the early 2000s. This is where the industry was very chaotic and volatile, as some would say. So people were dropping left and right, some were getting let go, some were actually leaving. And people kept saying, no, like we're solid, we're good, we don't have to worry about anything, and then some people started, silently, disappearing and so on and so forth to the point where I'm like, no, like I remember the layoff that I had at my last company. Like I see the writing on the wall, even if it's not necessarily for me specifically. I'm like, just in case. That's when I started sending out the feelers, and that's when Crystal showed up on my radar and stuff. And that was a funny story in and of itself, because when they reached out to me, they had aspirations to come up with a next iteration of Tomb Raider that was much more combat oriented. And when I say combat, it's not just the run and gun. They had I can't remember exactly which one it was, but it was one of the versions they had released previously had a lot more dynamic movement. She was like doing a lot more acrobatic moves, some melee, and they're very limited at the time and stuff like that too. But they wanted to expand on that. They're like, this is a really cool opportunity to really, really plus things up. And I'm like, I am totally down. And really exciting opportunities, really, really cool. I get up there, super just excited and stoked to get going. First day on the job, my lead pulls me inside. He goes, "Oh yeah, by the way, all that cool, dynamic, crazy, over the top stuff we were planning on doing, yeah, that's all gone. We just had these focus tests on one of the remakes that they were putting out there. It was basically a remake of the first game, and it was all run and gun, all like very like hands off, like sandbag pew 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 from range and stuff. And they're like, yeah, that's doing really, really well, so we're gonna do that." And I'm like, wait, what? And so I'm the melee combat designer you just brought in to do melee combat. So what am I doing again? But what actually wound up happening is I got shifted from combat for Laura as the main character into the NPCs. So I was like, okay, cool. Like I get an opportunity to showcase melee for the enemies. I'm like, okay, like that's something interesting I could futz with, because I'd done AI designing in the past, but this is completely different. Like this is a very different style of dynamic navigation, because I was working with nav mesh a lot. It was one of the only times I ever got to work with 3D pathing enemies as well, which was super cool to work with, like bats, birds, different types of sharks and stuff too. So it was like it was nuts, like getting to work with like different kinds of volumes and like turning radiuses, and like it was super, super cool. So it wound up being this project where like I was up in the Bay Area for a couple of years and working on something completely different with that I thought I was going to be working on, like as far as my day to day and such. But it was cool. Like I was expanding on my skill set, and opportunities and meeting different people and so on and so forth. But at the time, that's when some personal stuff came to the fore, where my dad actually ended up running into a bunch of health issues, to the point where he was getting admitted to the hospital, and like things weren't looking good. And so my mom was by herself, and like there was all this bad news, coming up and such. And it was one of those things where I'm like, okay, I can either sit back and, get updates and hope for the best, or I can drop things and, head back down to that area. And that's when I started making some calls. And ultimately, I wound up accepting a spot at, oh my gosh, it was
Bottle Rocket.
It was Bottle Rocket. There you go.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's been a while. But yeah, so I wound up accepting a spot at Bottle Rocket, which is super, super funny, because this was one of the situations where we just missed each other in our career paths, because I had applied for and got accepted for a spot on the God of War team.
That's right.
At the time.
Yes, right at that time. Yeah.
Yeah. But after working through like not only the numbers, but also like, the whole intent of me coming back down was to go help, take care of my folks. And they're down in San Diego, Santa Monica is quite a bit of ways and stuff too. So I wound up turning down the God of War gig, and one of my buddies will never let me live that down. He was so mad when he found out, like, you wouldn't, no, like he wouldn't talk to me for like a month and a half. But then, like I said, I wound up taking the Bottle Rocket gig, which, like, it's interesting because I did leave the Tomb Raider project before the end of it. And that there was a few people that took that personally, like on that team, it's always a bummer when that happens, because they actually wound up cutting me from the credits on that too.
Wow.
Yeah, to the point where I'm like, oh, okay, well, all right, like you do you, dude, and stuff too. So it's like, all right, but it was one of those things where it's like, the people that I work with, that I get along with, was, we still maintain like pleasantries and so on and so forth. But it was just one of those things where I'm like, that's
strange.
That was unnecessary. Like, okay, like, especially considering the circumstances. I'm like, but yeah, that's when I made the trip down to Bottle Rocket and its share of insanity, as it were.
Well, yeah, I definitely want to. Like, I mean, I'm conscious. It feels like it's been like 15 minutes, Bal, but we're getting through it. It's you've got so much great history to dig into. I want to just jump forward just very slightly. So you Bot Rocket, that became Namco, is that right?
Yeah.
If I remember you telling me, yeah. So you were Bot Rocket. They ended up becoming Namco.
Sorta. It was. Sort of. I was at Bottle Rocket. I was working on the Flash. They were working on a Splatterhouse game at the time.
That's right. Yeah.
But that could be its own episode in and of itself, dude. There was some insanity that went on there, to the point where Namco actually came down in the middle of our workday. We got a call from the execs to say, "Hey, can we all meet in the center meeting area?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's not weird at all." We showed up and Namco was there. We didn't see. We just saw some people in the background, and they're like, "Okay, everybody. So Namco's here. They're here to get all of their computers, and we're all shutting down. Like we actually they shut down the studio then and there and such. So that was, like I said, it's a very involved situation. Like I said, I think there's been a few articles that have been written up on it, but it was a thing. But what wound up happening was several of the core producers had been in conversations with some of the key folks over here, and we actually wound up forming like a satellite group of Namco, made up of I think it was 25 people that were originally not just from the original Splatterhouse team, but also from the Flash and stuff, just in the studio in general. And we built this satellite group because we were familiar with the IP, we were familiar with the tools and so on and so forth, and they brought us on to finish that project. So we were there pretty much until the end of Splatterhouse, and then there was the option to go move back up to the Bay Area, or bye-bye and such too. Yeah. So most people just said, okay, cool, like we finished what we had to do. So
yeah, got it. Okay, yeah. I remember you telling me some of those stories about that period. You're right. That's definitely its own thing. But moving forward into kind of Double Helix, that's where you sort of were really. I mean, combat was your bread and butter again there at Double Helix. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah. So I was able to dig into combat a lot when I was at Bottle Rocket and Namco and such. But I was shifted around a lot. Like I was combat primarily on the Flash, but then when I got moved over to Splatterhouse, I was bosses, levels, some combat, NPCs, like that. Like I said, there's a lot that was going on and stuff too. But then when my buddies over at Double Helix reached out to me, like combat was the jam. Like I was like, oh cool, like I get to work with the old crew, and like. At the time, we were working on I don't know if I mentioned, but it was a zombie first-person shooter with two different campaigns, one from the perspective of Patient Zero and one from the perspective of boots on the ground soldier that's trying to make it through this, hellish scenario and stuff like that. It was super awesome project. Like it was nuts on that. So I was, it was one of the coolest opportunities you had to work on first person melee, which, as you know, is incredibly difficult to do. But we had it working, and it was really, really fun. But yeah, like I was doing for that one, I was doing melee combat for the main character. I was also doing weapons and abilities and so on and so forth. Partway through the project, I got shifted over to multiplayer, so I was actually setting up like a competitive multiplayer mode where one side was playing as the zombies, one side was playing as the humans, and it was so much fun. It was crazy. But yeah, like again, like thankfully when we got back to Double Helix, like again, like it's the old crew, so we're very much combat centric in focus, but they were more flexible. Like the collective was very much, we are melee and only melee, and stuff for the most part, with some range here and there and stuff. But when I got to Double Helix, it was a mixed, like some range, some abilities, some melee, different perspectives, different camera work, and so on and so forth. But there was a lot going on there.
Yeah, it's interesting how much your career is kind of focused around maybe there's a spine there, right? There's a spine of combat that kind of is a through line, if you like. But throughout, it's been interesting hearing you sort of relate different sides of combat, from different viewpoints, ranged and melee, doing enemies versus player, right? Like how your career is kind of we've woven its way through the different aspects. We've woven its way through the various aspects of combat, but and obviously you then from Double Helix you worked on some big games there. Went on to Carbine and Sony again as combat designer, and then obviously we worked together at ZOS, where we're both doing combat, and now as lead combat designer at Skybound. So how do you reflect on that, right? How do you reflect on that sort of combat focus? Clearly, it's a passion. Clearly, it's who you are as a gamer. I'm guessing I'm saying I guess. I think I know from spending time chatting to you. But combat is also some combat games, fighting games. Those kind of games are something you play as well. That's not just your profession. It's your hobby too.
Well, it's funny too, because even though combat has always been kind of like a through line throughout my career. Thankfully, I've worn all of the hats you can wear as a designer. And it's funny too, because a lot of my lessons that I've learned as a designer, they're transferable to a lot of different components in game design as a whole. Because one of the things that we talked about a lot on our project in the past was celebration moments. It's like how to sell certain things, certain interactions, something that has like a really compelling response from the player, identifying that and then plussing that up, to a point where it's like they know this is a cool thing. Let's make it as cool as possible, or as, as much as we can, to fit what we're trying to get, like experience wise and such too. And going back to the storyteller analogy in the past, everything we do is a different aspect. We're telling a different component of an overall story, and stuff too, where it's like, as I've had opportunities to work with all the different disciplines, all the different projects, coming at it from the perspective of AI, coming at it from level design and like overall pacing, because I saw one of your previous podcasts when you're talking about rhythm, you're talking about music and how that, like, oh my gosh, that's a 1-to-1 for actual like level design and stuff too. Taking that and actually applying that across the board, like, because we as designers, we don't want this experience, like, because that's a really boring kind of like you know what to expect kind of things. You want the peaks and valleys, you want like the crescendos and stuff, like you want those buildups and you want sometimes pregnant pauses and sometimes the payoffs and stuff too. You want to surprise players, and a lot of that has come through a lot of really kind of like hard learned lessons. It's like, this could have been better. This could have been a lot better. How could it have been better? And stuff too. And like, even now, like looking back at the catalog of stuff, I'm like, that was a really bad game, and like, but at the same time, it's like, yes, understanding like now you're in a position where you can look back at your old games and kind of realize like, if I were to do something now, like I would do this, I would change this up. This would be my focus. And like, I would definitely plus this up because that was kind of like the core, like fun aspect of the game in and of itself and stuff too. So it was just one of those things where combat was always like this thing that I could always lean on because that has been like focus for the longest time. But like weaving in and out of it to learn all the different aspects of game design has just helped like across the board. It's like, oh, cool. Like I can draw inspiration because of this, and use that in order to drive, an experience that I'm trying to get across.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that a lot. And just building off that quickly, like how has that changed you as a gamer, right? How have those, your professional life and your hobby, how have they intertwined and overlapped or broken apart? How's that gone for you?
I've gotten a lot better at detaching the game designer brain from my experiences. But it depends though too, because there are times where I'll play a game and if I see the cracks really early, the game designer brain is going to kick in. I'm going to be like, what were they thinking? Like, why would you do that? Like, this makes no sense or something like that. I'll start to pick it apart because it's not just the game designer thing. It's also the QA thing, and it's also like, because one thing that I will touch on, I'm going to mention this in a sec, but there's also the cynical, like just pain in the ass, like doom and gloomer side of things where it's like, throughout my career, I got to a point where like everything sucked. I'm like, I'm seeing this new game and like, I don't know, what were they thinking? Like it's total trash and so on and so forth. And it was a total just, mentality, like negative douchebag kind of thing where it's like, it doesn't, that doesn't help. It doesn't help anything and stuff too. So, but there's still times where like, I'll see something, I'm like, I don't like it and stuff like that. I'm like, no, knock it off. Like, not some angsty teen or something like that. I'm like, okay. And a lot of times, especially now, one of my biggest takeaways for anybody that's trying to learn game design is to play a game and just experience it and try to break down, like when you're playing it, just play it and stuff and kind of experience what's going on and stuff like that too. If you get an opportunity, like, try to get in the designer's head. Like, what were they trying to get across? Like, what was their intent with this system? What was the intent with this camera? Like, what is it, these controls? Like, one of the case in points is like when you play Resident Evil, like they have a very clunky control scheme, but that was intentional. Like they wanted, like the same thing with their camera. They wanted to feel claustrophobic. They didn't want you to be like super dynamic, super over the top kind of action star. Like, no, like you're in this middle of this hectic scenario where you can only see this much in front of you. And some people could just come out of the side and chainsaw you and stuff. So it's just like, there's a lot of intentional designs that go through a process and you weren't there. Like you weren't there to experience, the trials and the tribulations. You weren't there to understand their process, all the steps they took to get to that point. But you can extrapolate. You can be like, okay, how did they end up here? And stuff. And then the second part of that is always, what would I do as a designer to improve this and stuff too? And it's nothing more than mental exercises, trying to improve my craft. Like, I could get better as a designer to learn the lessons from this and figure out how to avoid similar, potholes or traps or what have you and stuff too. And like I said, you can do the same thing with your own games. You look back and go, yep, yeah, I could have done this. I could have done this better. Yep. Like a lot better. Okay. And stuff
what was I thinking?
Dude. Oh, yeah. But you have the hindsight. You're just like, oh no, I know what was I thinking. I didn't know shit at the time.
Yeah, exactly. So. That's what I was thinking is I knew nothing. I love that though, because I think you're absolutely right that once you get inside the system, right, once you see how games are made, it can be very easy to then look at every other game and go, oh, yes, I can see what you're doing. I could have done that better. Right? It's so easy to drift into that cynical side, like you're saying. And I think that the way you're explaining it there is a really good antidote to that. It's a really good way of kind of tempering that side and going, no, hang on. What's the positive way of looking at this? What's the good intent, right? What they were trying to do? I love that. That's really smart.
Well, the one thing that I used to do, because there was a time where I would actually actively play like really bad games.
I still do, yeah.
And what I'll do is I'll actually play the game, and a lot of times I'm just like, oh, this is painful and stuff. But I'll try to find the gems. Like I'll try to find like, okay, what was cool? What was actually cool about the game? What was a smart and clever design? Because we've been through some pretty bad development cycles where you've been dealt a hand, so you got to make the best of what you can. So there have been situations where I'm like, yeah, we're going to do whatever the heck we can and we'll see what happens and stuff too. But you'll see moments of inspiration. You'll see these little glimpses of, you're like, that was cool. Like the rest of this, the wrapper wasn't as cool. Like there was some trips and stuff too, but there's this component there that's really neat. And a lot of times you could find that in almost any game that's out there. Like regardless of the genre, like regardless if it's on like mobile or like, VR or whatever, like there's always nuggets of just like, that's cool. And for me, like that's where I look for a lot of different kinds of inspiration. I'm like, I'm going to take this crazy idea, but I'm going to apply it to a fighting game, and stuff. And people are like, what? Like, where did that even come from? And you're like, well, it's from this one little tiny, it's like inspiration comes from anywhere, dude. Like you just gotta be open to it.
And you know what that sounds like, pal? Breaking the rules.
Exactly.
No, I think I might be trying to flog that dead horse just a little bit, but it is interesting that's there is a pattern there, and I don't know how you relate to this, because I think we're very similar in our upbringings and what's drawn us to video games. I think there's something in that original arcadey kind of era of video games where in order to get you to put the quarter in or the 50p in, they needed to respond and give you feedback and inspire you and get you excited quickly.
Yep.
And I think there's lessons that I know personally, I feel there's lessons that I learned from those games that I still carry with me today, right? In terms of feel, responsiveness, in terms of systems, right? And I think when you've got that grounding, which, you certainly have, and it feels like it kind of fed you into the industry in the first place, got you in the first place. And given the focus on combat, it feels like there's a lot of overlap there in terms of lessons you learned and things that inspired you in those early days that have continued to feed you, and drive you and motivate you as you move forward. And you've had a heck of a career, and it's still going. And I love that. I love that. It's been great to kind of dig into it. I have one last question I love to ask. You mentioned that your folks were kind of not that impressed with your career choice. How do they relate to it now?
They've actually seen my interview videos and like appearances on like different shows and websites and stuff. And they're like, wow. Like, for the longest time, my dad kept saying, hey, you could talk to one of your cousins. He's a graphic designer. I'm sure you can get in there. And I'm like, totally different design, Dad. Like, I'm a game designer. He's not even anywhere near the same thing and stuff too. But it got to a point like where they just kind of, I don't want to say warmed up to it, but they accepted it. They're just kind of like, okay, I get it. You're, and it's hard. Like it's hard for people that are so used to a very specific, opinion or a take on something. And you're like, no, this is what I'm going to do because this is what I love. This is what I'm about and stuff too. And actually become reasonable, successful in it and stuff too. It's like, sometimes it takes a while for people to come around to it. So
for sure. And then as a father and a husband, how does your family relate to your career there?
My son really wants to get more involved. He'll come up to the office sometime when I'm actually working or I'm in a meeting and stuff, and he's just like, and he'll start asking questions. He's like, why is that guy doing that stuff with the punching? And I'm like, Dante, one sec. And I'm like, and then I'll show him like, oh yeah, this is the superhero and this is the bad guy and and stuff too. And I've just started the slow process of exposing him to games now. He's seen stuff like on like on the phone, obviously, and it's like the beep boop boop, and like it's pretty low key stuff. But pretty soon I'm gonna get him, like I'm gonna show him consoles and such too. Like I actually got this little it's like a little, it's almost like a Game Boy, but it's got like almost like a MAME style engine where it's got a bunch of games on it and stuff too. So I'm hey, look, check this out. Try this game. And, getting used to like pushing the D-pad makes your character move, and pressing this button does one thing. And it's absolutely amazing just seeing him go, oh, okay. And then just start doing stuff. And I'm like, that's so cool. And everything. We'll see if my daughter gets into it at all. She's got her own kind of like brand of crazy and stuff too. So, my wife doesn't really do much gaming. She used to do some mobile stuff and everything like that, but she's not really into it as much and everything too. So, but yeah, there's no friction, thankfully, and stuff too. So it's just, it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the time, Bau. It's been a great conversation, really interesting career. I do feel like we've kind of whistle-stopped through some of it without.
And then
going,
10 years happened.
Yeah, we could go for another hour, I think. But we'll do a follow-up at some point. But
cool.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been great to kind of dig into who you are as a person, who you are as a gamer, who you are as a developer. And yeah,
dude.
Thanks again.
Thanks for bringing me on. It was awesome talking about this stuff and reliving all the insanity.
Yeah, I loved it. Thank you.
Cool, dude.